I was saying, I think we all a product of our early backgrounds. And I was born in South Africa during apartheid and really saw how systems and governments could create systems that were optimized to inflict great pain and suffering. And, that informed a lot of who I was and I think what I became. A lot of the roles I've had in life have been very much about future facing, sort of on the edge of sort of next generation education and technology. And, TEDx was just one of the stops in my path, in life to be curious, be open, and live a interesting life. Many of my positions in life have been often, as I say, on the edge, but also translating between different groups of people who either speak different languages for different reasons, and not necessarily literal languages, but come from different cultures, or technologists and storytellers, and bringing them to find a common intersection in how they can see the world or translate the world. And so I think many of our problems right now somehow stem from that issue, that we often see the world very differently, and we have social media that is creating the single story or series of single stories, and we've stopped being able to listen to each other and understand each other and at least respect each other's perspectives in a way that is respectful. And so a lot of my journey has been around educating and helping build bridges between people who see the world very differently. And I think TEDx was that, and BOMA is a continuation of that.
Beautiful, beautiful journey. How do you see, so last week we had a session with a Silicon Valley guy who was open to share some future off thoughts. And I asked him future off community, and his answer was quite obvious. It's like, people, we have this issue that we treat each other worse than 5 years ago. And I think community is getting more and more important to bring together also and determine values, how we should move on and how we should treat each other. So everyone understands that community is so important, and everyone feels like, I want to build my community. But then I don't see so many communities actually really growing. What do you see is the thing that you think you're seeing differently than most of the people, organizations, or groups are doing when they're trying to format community, format a group of people following a mutual idea, or just whatever determines them as being a community?
So I think we're living in a very difficult time. I mean, even pre-COVID, in that people are looking for ways to make meaningful connections. And creating an authentic community is primarily about finding a way to create authentic connections between people. The challenge of this moment in time is that we now are living online, and it's even harder to find that sense of authentic connection, right? BOMA, a few weeks after COVID hit, we did a round the world summit where we basically did 2 hours in every country around, because our Chinese partner was almost 8 weeks ahead of us, what we could learn from each other. And in that moment, we built this community of people that around the world that was learning from each other. And in that moment, it was an authentic journey that people needed and wanted. Within 3 weeks later, when we did the similar thing, but with mental health, everybody had their online offering, right? And some online offerings, and I've been to many of them, a lot of them I drop in and out, feel meaningful, and others don't at all, right? And so I think it's about this. It's about how do we connect the right people right now using technology to have something meaningful that feels meaningful to us as humans. And also that starts to think about, as I say, the part that I really focus on, or have been focused on right now, is around leadership, because I think we have a real void of leadership and courageous leadership in the world right now. And so, BOMA's tackling this on two fronts. We're doing large scale of events around big global challenges, but we also focus on how do you go in to organizations to create and educate on what it means to be a courageous leader with humility in this moment in a world that is so disrupted and changing so quickly. And in order to lead in the future, what kind of skills are you going to need? Because they're going to have to be very different to the kind of leaders we have right now. And so, you know, it's important to think about not, can I create a community? It's important to try to think about what do we need as humanity to connect in meaningful ways to drive this world forward in a way that we can be more inclusive, that we can put purpose and planet at the head of our leadership structures, that we can, you know, a lot of people have lost trust. You know, how do we create that sense of trust for our organizations and leadership? And, you know, think about business as a force for good, and then how all these complex problems are so interconnected. And so I sort of feel as we think about communities, it's not just community for community's sake. It's like, what do we need right now to drive our world forward in a more intentional, intelligent way? And so that's what I wrestle with every day. You know, I think, you know, I spent many years in the education space. I've spent a lot of years in technology. I ran, you know, a division of Microsoft when they were trying to be in a broadband network back in the day when we're still connecting through 14.4 modems. I ran a big web strategy agency where we rolled up, you know, 40 little shops around the world, and I was running the flagship office, you know. But and then I went to TED and built TEDx. But you know, TED and TEDx is an amazing platform for inspiration and storytelling. And the part that I think is important is we try to figure out what is that next step. How do we really deliver action, and how do we get communities connecting in meaningful ways to deliver that meaningful action, to design the kind of world we all want. Mm-hmm. And so that's at the heart of, you know, if I have to think about my ikigai, that's at the heart of what I care about, you know. And BOMA is the, you know, yet another step in this evolution of how do we bring profit and purpose together in a meaningful way.
I'm spending my Saturdays online on Zoom together with the metal community. I don't know if you heard about them, metal.international. It's kind of 300 or 400 people in the Zoom chats, and some of them are giving a talk, and then it's an open conversation. It's actually quite random and interesting. I really serendipitously and randomly met the founder of Atari over there and had to chat with him. However, why I'm mentioning this is you mentioned Corona and COVID-19, and of course that was a topic over there as well. And one of the people said that everyone's talking about the crisis, but a crisis basically by definition is something that interrupts a situation. Everyone is waiting to go back to the situation as it was before. And the person, I forgot his name, he said that what's happening right now is actually a template, how we behave in a situation where everything is different. And of course, we're not going back to where we've been before. It's going to be different even after that. But that's just, it's kind of like payday. It's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the beginning of a series of things we're not prepared for. Other people are saying this is highly accelerated fast forward of things that probably would have happened in 5 years from now, or happening now. We've just jumped 5 years into the future with high-speed acceleration of developments. I was just wondering, like, what do you see? What's your did you redefine your or rephrase your definition of meaningful connections when all you have is a screen and a camera, and depending on the quality of your camera, it's on the internet connection is blurry, or at least it's smooth, and some bookshelf backgrounds, some nice window backgrounds, or some just videos looping in 15 seconds background. So everything is back to very flat, and technology might change that, but a lot of people are quite convinced that we're not going back to large meetings in large rooms with a lot of people at the same time. Which, of course,
yeah, I mean, look, I think COVID will change a lot of things. It's not only large meetings in large rooms. I mean, it is going to disrupt education, which was the very last thing to be disrupted. If you look at telemedicine, especially in the US, you know, a lot of regulations are being passed through in the last few weeks that you would never have gotten approved, as well as a lot of people are starting to adopt this idea of you can, virtually go to a doctor and be taken care of. Supply chains, there are a lot of things that are going to change in this moment. I go back and forth whether the changes are going to be that radically meaningful, because I think there are two forces at play. There's the old guard who wants to hang on to that single story of how things were before, and they want to get over this so they can revert back to that story of the way things were before, because to them that was the optimization of humanity to maximize for shareholder value, to and all the sort of drivers that Milton Friedman put forward in the 50s, where the corporate governance piece of it, and they're looking for ways just to get back to normal per se. It'll never be completely normal, but then there is a whole movement of people who want to use this moment to reimagine things, that they could be different in multiple different ways, and decentralized, open source, all the different drivers that you could imagine if you were going to start with a new story and trying to imagine a world that is more fair, and where the power structures aren't command and control and top down. And so you can feel the tension in the world right now between those two different stories, and how they play out, I think, is still a big question mark for me. And I'll give you an example. I've been talking to Scripps. We've done a bunch of collaboration with some of the work we've been doing online, and they're a research institution in the US, amazing research institution. And, they are working with a whole bunch of a series of organizations, I think primarily maybe driven by the Gates Foundation, around how do you open source some of these tools and put them in a toolbox. So for the next pandemic, you have this open source toolbox. Scientists have also been collaborating in a way unimaginable, where as they make breakthroughs, they have a platform where everybody shares those breakthroughs. So you could see a world where that becomes the norm moving forward, or you could see a world where, post-COVID and we have a vaccine, the lawyers get involved and we just revert back, right? I don't think anything's a given right now, and I think it's going to take some really intentional, intelligent kind of debates, discussions, and then real actions to make sure we use this moment to reimagine a lot of things. And so, as I say, I flip back and forth. And, we have such a void in leadership, especially in the US right now, that there are days where I'm not convinced that we will come out of it with a whole new, better narrative for any of these things, right? And so, yeah, that's not to be negative, but, I think it all comes back down to courageous leadership. And then your ability to imagine how things could be different. We're just we really are just the stories we tell each other. And I sense in every great leader I've ever come into contact with is an amazing storyteller, right? They're able to create a whole new story, so you see something in a whole new way. And really, if you look at anything, if you look at our religions, our scientific institutions, they're all they're all about the stories that we have created as humanity. And so we do have a real opportunity right now to redefine and create new visions, but it's going to take a lot of work by all of us who are able to imagine how it could be different.
Very good points. Very interesting. Let's change gears. You've shared conversation phases with me, so let's start being more interactive with the group. One thing, all of you, you're invited to ask questions, put them in the chat. I think that's a good way of clustering the questions. But second, Lara, you might want to introduce this. So we're going to split out all of you in 3 minutes of 2 or 3 people in one breakout room. And it's going to be about your why. What inspires you to lead and make change? What is your core motivation and vision of possibility? Lara, would you like to add something to this so everyone really knows what they should be discussing about the next 3 minutes when I shoot you all into the breakout rooms?
Well, I think anybody who's achieved something they're really proud of in life, has an ikigai or a passion, or cares deeply about what they are working on. It's hard to really be motivated if you don't have some deep connection to what you're working on. And so I guess part of the question would be, what excites you? What do you wake up in the morning and go, this is something I want to learn more about, or something that I really would like to change about the world to make it a different kind of place? So I guess that would be what my question is.
Good. So I'm going to shoot you all, and Lara, you're going to be in one of the breakouts. So maybe you guys, two of you will be lucky to be in a breakout with Lara. We see each other back in 4 minutes. I think 4 minutes is a good time frame for this, and I'm curious where you guys have been going. So see you in 4 minutes. I love it when everyone comes back. Pop, 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 pop.
It was very, very short.
Very short.
Yeah, and it forces yourself not to waste time when you only have 3 minutes to. Tell me about it. How was that? What did you come up with, Peter?
It was very short. So I think we have some common ground among us. The thing about reconnecting each other in different ways. At least that was what I got out of it. I didn't hear Lara to the end, but yeah. So that's what we were talking about.
Okay.
Did I miss anything?
Marcus, you were with Rezul together.
Yeah, Rezul's great. He really wants to change the paradigms of how we're all operating as a world, and almost, let's not make it people working to make other people richer and going through just pain to get there, which sort of puts me into. I'm just working on the world of education to help people not get hijacked by education. Rezul is at one stage above in trying to say, let's just fuck the whole system up a little bit.
Nice. Evelyn, you were together with Martin and Olga.
Yeah, we did kind of get into a little bit of the introduction, introducing each other. So that means we're lacking a little bit time to get more concrete into what drives us, like that.
Yeah, I can always remember when when there are conferences in a world where there are conferences where people go to, this is my peak season where I have up to three speaker coaching sessions every day. And one of the things that I always enjoy when speakers are doing their job well, I borrowed it from improv, and improv says start anywhere. And when you start anywhere, you might not start with introducing yourselves. You can start anywhere and then later introduce yourself. So when we break out, and it's by design that these breakout sessions are always so short, because it forces yourself to get on a point, or hey, we have 3 minutes with 3 people, each 1 minute, jump into this. So it's not going to be your last chance, and definitely not your last chance in this session to hop on a breakout, because we have phase 2, and maybe also Lara, you might want to join me with explaining what it is about the personal journey into leadership and change making. Give us a briefing for another. I'm going to give you 5 minutes now, breakout session, and I'm going to recreate the room, so you're not going to be in the same rooms again. Don't waste time by introducing yourselves. You get to know each other during the week.
So did you want me to lead into it? Is that what you're saying?
Lead into the conversation phase 2.
Yeah, I think I don't look at leadership as, I think leadership is a choice. It's our choice. Nobody's born a leader, and I'm the last person to be born a leader. It's something I think it's your choice to bring your values and your voice to a world that is, I think, pretty broken and not working right now. And it's not something I went into this world saying that I wanted to be a leader. It's something I guess I grew into, and maybe it's different for different people, but nobody is born a leader.
Okay. So you should talk about your journey of becoming a leader and change maker, touching into personally formative experiences, turning points, sparks of inspiration, and or flashes of insights. And of course, what were your lessons learned in that journey? And this time I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and it's going to be new rooms that open right now. How is that for you? Share your sessions with me. You, Lara and Rasul, you've been in the first session. So Rasul, go ahead. How was it?
Well, it was like a new experience. So like to talk about the future and how we can develop it. It's like we have the chance to influence what in future is going to happen, because we are here now and we can think about it, and then with the ideas we have, we can materialize it. It's like everything, like the phones we are like, or the Zoom we are doing, that was an idea from a person, and then he took a team together, and then they developed, like they did the Zoom, like everything what is with it. And then they created something. We can talk from Vienna, from New York, from the UK, and talk together, like here 10 people or something. It's like we have to talk about our ideas and then materialize it and make it real.
Did you hijack the theme and make it your own? And we're not going to talk about leaders. We're talking about something that comes out of the group of us that we'd like to discuss.
Sorry, what?
Did you talk about the journey into leadership, or is it?
Yeah, we talked about the leadership, like how it's gonna evolve, like the TEDx, how it's gonna work. Because sometimes if you are a manager for 3 years or something, maybe it's gonna be a little bit boring. And how can you take a team together and evolve it? Like Lara said, it's like, it seems for her to be static in the TEDx. And yeah, that was like just her perspective. She also said, and we maybe have to look for a way that it evolves to another level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the journey of TEDx is a feeling 1 hour and more conversation. And I think we can agree to leave this out for here.
I think what we're saying is that, you know, in any company, as it gets bigger, the challenges, actually, sorry, let me fix it.
You have feedback. I can mute one of you. You have two personalities in this room.
In any company,
I'm not sure which one is active. Is the one active with the background, the bookshelf? Because then I can just shoot out the other one.
I was trying to do it both. So, can you hear me?
Not so well. It worked best from the phone.
So I think what we were saying is that in any company, as a company gets bigger, as it gets larger, the innovate, it becomes more difficult. So I think what we were saying is that in any culture, as an organization grows, gets bigger, it's a culture. Innovation culture, have to work harder on themselves into the organization. Big companies tend to be static, and people who are innovating from the inside, often the immune system attacks them, and this happens to continue to innovate and continue to create a culture for people where they're excited about coming to work every day.
And I feel like with organizations or within organizations, there is a part where the organization is growing, and then there's decision, and it's very often when you talk with startups, you talk about exits. Are we going to try to keep stable where we are, or are we continuously developing, evolving, and growing, not only on a customer base? And I feel like a lot that organizations are very interesting, exciting, and inspiring, and then they've reached a point where they're just not inspiring anymore. They're just it's like keeping steady, but there's no keeping steady, of course. So,
well, I think they're different drivers, right? So when you've got a big board and your board's primary goal is shareholder value, and it's not stakeholder value, then your mission and your goals are being set by maximizing the shareholder value versus maximizing for gender equality, innovation, transparency, and all the other factors that create a more of a stakeholder driven organization that could build a better future world, most certainly, but also that could be a more successful company, because quite frankly, the next generation are going to demand that companies and their leadership align behind a different set of values. And so you're not going to be a successful company if all you're thinking about is this top-down state, maximizing for shareholders, not trying to create some level of gender equality and transparency in your organization. That next generation, you're not going to be able to attract the best workforce if you're not thinking about that. But it also will drive a more successful organization. A lot of the research is showing that by thinking about leadership in a different way, and you actually end up being a more successful company. It's come from your CEOs, it can't just come from the bottom up. Everybody has to, a big challenge that a lot of big companies are trying to figure out right now. Some are.
Evelyn and Marcus, who wants to talk? You are all muted. You're both muted, so if you're talking both, we can't hear any of you. Let me unmute y'all. And who's unmuted first talking? Evelyn.
Okay, again me. We were talking a lot of the personal background, what brought us to the to something we would consider leadership now, which is actually the personal drive and our personal stories that are related to it. And we detected a lot of common ground related to that one. Marcus, tell me if you don't align with it too much. Pardon?
Marcus, would you like to pick an example?
Well, we both recognize that there are some crazy assumptions made on inadequate data. And Evelina was talking about how the assumptions are made just in terms of what your name is. And whether that's causing a social distancing because you just happen to have the wrong name, and everything which goes against that. So we started talking about the segmentations which we've got based upon totally inadequate bits of information.
Okay. And the last room was with Martin, Olga, and Peter. Olga, would you like to share from your breakout? I hope you did introduce yourselves.
We actually had a little bit of a debate between us three, what leadership actually means and how we define it and how it might be appropriate at different stages. Because obviously, not obviously, but for me, I usually look at the perspective of leadership from the position of a startup owner or a small business owner. And then I think when you are dealing with something like COVID or crisis during COVID, it's not all about inspirational leadership, but it's about giving people this reassurance that there will be better days, what can be seen from political leaders right now. And then we just kind of are going back and forth about how it can be balanced, how it can be working well for some people, and how the leadership style effectively needs to be adaptive towards the circumstances that you as a personality, you as a community influencer, or you as a business owner or a political leader are right now.
What are your thoughts about that, Lara, when you hear the group sharing from their thoughts? And I'm unmuting you. You're still muted. I can't unmute. I think you have to unmute yourself.
I agree. I mean, I'd like to hear more from some of the other groups because I feel like I've done a lot of the talking. So I think that because we don't have a lot of time, so I'm curious to hear what the other groups talked about.
Okay. Peter.
Yeah. Well, it's just as Olga said, we have some different perspectives. I mean, the difference between leadership in a startup setting or more classic corporate setting. I mean, for me, leadership is very mission driven. So it's more like an expedition. So I guess I don't know if it's easier, but at least it's different than, I mean, in a corporate setting where you need some other leadership skills. So that's my perspective on it. I mean, bottom line is to be able to motivate people and make them believe in whatever you're doing. And that they will keep on following you, and especially when it's super important that people are not leaving in the middle of it, because I mean it's pretty fragile in the early days, at least, to do a startup when it comes to team.
I can remember, and I loved it, Kayla's talk at the TEDx, at the BOMA Momentum in Paris, when she talked about courage as the most important skill of leaders. And I think it also goes in the direction of where I think, and let me just admit Diane into this because she's taking the next session. I think one of the biggest problems that organizations in Europe have is that their CEOs are 4 ways away from their retirement. So they do things that have been working the past 30 years, but not run experiments because they get bonuses on the KPIs that have been established. And that's usually all connected to money. And I think in a time where organizations develop exponentially, where problems develop exponentially, and when the mindset has also changed, the amount of experiments must be somehow implemented in a KPI or in a measurement if a leader is doing his job well. And courage pays into this, but courage basically means that like Seth Godin says, you do things that might go wrong, right? That's kind of the art of leadership, that you dare greatly, as Brené Brown would put it. I think courage also means that you not only dare every time you're facing a risk decisions, but you actually also implement a momentum of risk decisions into your organization. So in Silicon Valley, there's a role called Director of Growth, and Director of Growth does nothing but experiments. Depending on the size of the company, he runs experiments. It doesn't deliver anything. His delivery is false or verified or falsified to a hypothesis, and reports to the CEO. That's his role. And he has his team, and there's a process going through this. And I think this is something that organizations need to implement in the structure, that experiment is not something, I mean, courage means that you're taking a risk decision. That's good, and I think that's important, but that's kind of how many risk decisions we have to take, or can you instrumentalize risk decisions by implementing a director of growth or whatever you'd like to name him that runs, I don't know, maybe 10 experiments every week as part of the organization. And it's not that the CEO has to make 10 courageous or 20 courageous decisions every week. It's that experiment means something that you think is true, and either you're right or you're wrong. Either way, you will be highly informed for future decisions, right? Because that's what an experiment delivers. It delivers information for future decisions by telling you what works or what does not work, related to a hypothesis. And I think that's my personal take. I don't know what you think about it, but it's my personal take. That's something that I miss with leadership. It's not only an attribute of character, but it's also we always.
I think.
Yes. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I think the part that's important to me are values, and values are a hard conversation, right? And so it's not just about growth, and it's about the values of the organization and being courageous to keep those values, right? And for example, in 2012, where YouTube recognized that the more sexually exploitative content that showed up on YouTube, the bigger the traffic, the more exponential the traffic growth was. Well, that leader at that moment of time, the CEO, had a choice to make. Does he catch it now and prevent it, or does he, go for maximum growth? And he chose to go for maximum growth, and he had to deal with the terrible fallout on the other side of that, right? Based on who he was, right? And you can look at Silicon Valley, and there are many of those examples. So, I think a lot of the hard work has to be done around the kind of society we want to see and how we create leaders to build that society. And that doesn't just mean unabated growth and innovation. It means we can do good and bad with that innovation. We know that. Technology is a tool, and we can decide what we do with it, and we can grow the hell out of a company, but at the end of the day, is it the kind of world we want to live in?
I think that's a beautiful closing word. Lara, thank you so much for this session. I feel like I want to keep on having this conversation for at least another 3 hours. That was a perfect kickoff into this.
Thanks for inviting me, Nikki.
Thank you so much for this.
Hopefully we can connect soon.
Yes, we definitely should. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I really enjoyed this, and let's reconnect soon. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you
everybody. Nice meeting everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.